Welcome aboard, everybody. Welcome aboard. Yeah, I almost forgot it was 9 o'clock. But I remembered. Yeah, not a happy day today. I don't know. Sometimes you wake up in a good mood. Thank you, DK Luce. Sometimes you wake up in a bad mood. Other times you don't wake up, and sometimes you get just a mood. All right, a lot to talk about. Thank you all. Kevin Hastings did a great job last night on an 11 o'clock show, Eastern Time, bringing in some new faces into the chat room from the great state of Honolulu. And thanks you, Kevin. So come on, everybody. If everybody gets one person to come into the chat room, then we'll be on our way to achieving our goal of 100 people in the chat room. Good morning to Greg, and good morning to Dale. Morning to the DK Luce and the Doug Boyle that you'll hear on Saturday. Good morning to George, who you'll hear on Sunday at 6:30. Phil Chapman, who you'll be hearing in your sleep. All you got to do is close your eyes and you think of Phil. Kevin Hastings, back on the beam, will be a surprise for tomorrow. We'll tell you about that in a minute. Timothy, my hooker, Unholy Toledo, is here. And there you go. And a bunch of guests and a great turnout. Okay, so let's get right to it. And before we do, the number one thing. Today we're going to be talking about the Chicago White Sox. And if we have some time, I will go over some of the players that were not drafted. I was going to do my team, but we'll save that. No, I have some comments about my team that we drafted in our slow draft. But it's going to be, let's take a look at some of the players that we did not draft. And that's pretty interesting. Before we do, Curt Schilling from 1992 to 2004, fifth in FIP, only trailing Pedro Martinez, Randy Johnson, Maddox, and Smoltz. He was sixth in inning pitched, sixth in OPS, sixth in batting average, sixth in earned run average. He will be a Hall of Famer the next election. And I saw the robots are coming to spring training. All right, so Manfred announced Wednesday that a computerized camera system will be used to call balls and strikes this spring. A computerized camera system. Look, and they claim it'll be more accurate than a human being standing there. That's what he said on an interview with Fox Business Network. So they began experimenting with this last season in the Independent Atlantic League, and I saw it in action in the Arizona Fall League. Now, prior to seeing it, I thought they were taking the umpire away. No umpire behind the plate. Who are you going to argue with? That was my first thought. But it's not like that at all. And I know we've talked about it before. I just want to get it straight so there's absolutely no misinterpretation. Good morning to Taco. Holy mackerel. Taco is here. Traveler is here. King Hap and Taco show up at the same time. They leave at the same time. That's pretty weird, man. I'll tell you that right now, okay? But here you go. So what it's going to be, plate umpires will be equipped with earpieces, okay? And they will signal the ball or call strikes as determined by a camera system. They are called robot umpires. They'll be used in the minor leagues this year. Now, from our experience, Andy and I saw it, and we didn't even realize it, but we did notice that the calls of balls and strikes were, I will say, as they did in the cigarette commercial, a silly millimeter slower. Okay? What cigarette commercial was that where it said a silly millimeter longer? Remember that there, George? If George is here. Even if he's not here, he'll still answer the question. But the point is that, yeah. But there was one instance where the ball was so far out of the strike zone that the batter started walking to first base on a walk, and the umpire called him back, and then they had a conference, and they put him back at first base. So it's, it's a very dangerous situation. They have to say that if there is an obvious, and what is obvious, if there's an obvious mistake by the cameras, there you go. Will it be overturned? And what does that do for pitch framing from those catchers, Yasmani Grandal and Molina and all these guys who know how to work their glove and get the ball from outside the zone inside the zone? Okay, let's talk about a potential closer. That's right, a potential closer. Pedro Strop. Now, this is not, headline news. It's not national news. There's no question this is not national news. But on the other side of the coin, it's interesting if you're playing fantasy baseball because Pedro Strop could actually get some saves. And we have a category called saves, okay? So it's important, okay? And here's why. The group of pursuers, there's a group of pursuers, okay, for Pedro Strop. The Texas Rangers is one of the two final clubs, but the Miami Marlins, okay, the Miami Marlins. If he lands in Miami, he could be the closer in Miami. So let's take a look. And so is he worth taking a shot? I know if I took a consensus, if we took the poll here, most people would say he stinks. But is he worth taking a shot to get some saves? I mean, is Urena going to be the closer in Miami? I don't think so. I really don't think so. And I was going to take Urena. I was all set to take Urena from the Marlins in our slow draft. And then as soon as I heard that Strop was negotiating, look, it's not going to be Yimi Garcia. It's not going to be Harlan Garcia. It's not going to be Ryan Stanek. Adam Conley got a shot. There's nobody there. Drew Steckenrider's got a bad elbow, so he will be dealt with very carefully. So take a flyer on Pedro Strop. If you're doing an early draft, take a flyer on Pedro Strop. He may wind up getting, 15, 20. He's always been steady, coming off a very down 2019, had some injuries that limited his availability. 34 years old, okay, had a terrible ERA, but, he's prone to the long ball, which may not be happening as much this year. So, velocity decline is a cause for concern. But it's not hard to envision a quick bounce back if Strop is at full health. He can induce a lot of swing and misses, and he can get a lot of ground balls. Okay? Alex Gordon signed a one-year deal. Okay? One of three position players. He's one of three position players to play 13 seasons or more with the Kevin Hastings Kansas City Royals. Name the other two Kansas City Royals who have played 13 years or more with Kansas City. Come on, first one in. You got to beat Kevin. You got to be quick on this one because Kevin's gonna, take it, right? That's right. Nick Anderson's with the Rays. Yeah, Stanek is the opener. So Strop is he could be somebody, right, George? There you go. George gets it. Frank White and George Brett come up with the only two other players to join now Alex Gordon. 13 seasons. One of the things, Josh Donaldson, he signed his contract, but let's really take a look at Josh Donaldson in Minnesota. Does that make him is he a better player now than he was, even though he was a pretty good player last year? He's still not getting the recognition of being a top star, but he had 191 plate appearances against the Twins. He walked 27 times, a walk rate of 14%. Donaldson was with Atlanta, went 4 for 9, walking 5 times. He's walked 100 times last year with Atlanta. Okay, and only Harmon Killebrew has done that. So, Josh Donaldson, his career average at Turner at Target Field. You talk about playing fields. You talk about what happens when Arenado gets traded outside of Colorado. We talked about DJ LeMahieu last year outside of Colorado when Cargo was traded. But when Josh Donaldson has a career average at Target Field of .373 with 10 homers, a .1283 OPS in almost 100 plate appearances, what does that mean? Now, does that mean that he plays well at Target Field? Or does that mean that the Minnesota pitching staff was awful? Which one would you say? With these great numbers, would you say that Donaldson is very comfortable in Target Field? Or would you say that Josh Donaldson and his numbers reflect some pretty bad pitching in Minnesota? Which one, as you analyze Donaldson and what it's going to mean for him to be playing for the Minnesota Twins, are you taking the position that he did well in Target Field because of the of the ballpark? Doug Boyle is here. Methical has joined us. Tito Luna has joined us. Timothy, my hooker, and away we go. Some great guests in the chat room as well. Okay. Or would you say that it's the Minnesota pitching staff? Now, Nick Castellanos, the Cincinnati Reds, and this came out today. John Heyman talked about it. It's in the Cincinnati newspapers as well, that they are already spending over $1 million in free agency this year. They remain the team most likely to get Nick Castellanos. Now, Cincinnati Reds fans are wondering whether the team remains interested in Castellanos, and yes, they are. They are absolutely interested. And when you take a look at the Reds, and we talked about them the other day, I kind of thought they were out of the Castellanos thing. I really did. I really didn't expect them to be Castellanos. We'll talk about some of the other teams and why. But with an outfield of Shogo Akiyama, Jesse Winker, Philip Ervin, especially against lefties, Nick Senzel, I wonder, Castellanos, Akiyama, they will get rid of this. If they sign Castellanos, you can bet your sweet bippy. Fly ball deep to center field. That's foul and out of play. You'll get Nick Senzel going to Cleveland, and you can etch that in your forehead because it's going to happen. You got that? If the Reds sign I think they're going to really negotiate with Senzel to Cleveland as well. Cleveland is salivating over Nick Senzel. That's the way it is, okay? So yep, that's right. Nick Senzel, one of the biggest, he's probably the biggest with Ozuna signing. So here's what you got. You got the Chicago Cubs, who missed the playoffs for the first time in 5 seasons. Well, it wasn't because of Castellanos. He hit .321 in 51 games. You would think that the Chicago Cubs would bring him back, and I'll tell you something, the Cubs, who had a $200 million plus payroll last season, are being physically, or whatever it is, being responsible money-wise. They haven't signed a single major league free agent. He fits in Chicago. But this tells me if Castellanos does not sign with the Chicago Cubs, you have to take the position, as we say, as the team goes, so goes the players, that the players on the Chicago Cubs should be downgraded. Downgraded in your thoughts. That's exactly what we think, okay? If they don't sign Castellanos, you downgrade every single Chicago Cub. The Cardinals, this is the team I can't figure out. They would also are desperate need, even before they had Ozuna, when they had Ozuna. And they won the NL Division Series last year. They are also becoming responsible money-wise. Their only deal was to get Adam Wainwright, who got a 1-year, $5 million contract. St. Louis, John Mozeliak signaled that the Cardinals were done in the outfield market, okay? And they've got so many young outfielders, but can they win? Can the Cardinals actually win as they did last year? Boy, this really makes the Cincinnati Reds a fantastic bet. Don't forget, Cincinnati is 15-1 to win the Central Division, 30-1 to win the World Series. It's becoming more and more that Cincinnati